talking.
Alright, well, just until everyone gets here, I guess. When Purim falls on Shabbos, this year it's Erev Shabbos, right?
Yeah. Well, the second day is Erev Shabbos. The first day is Thursday.
Harim Shushan, which means, I know the 15th falls on Shabbos. We find in the Yerushalmi that there's a few different customs how to conduct yourself. Alright, well, let's go into the next one. It's not really shy for this year.
A few years ago before that happens again.
It's going to be a few years yet?
Yeah.
When's the next time?
I think it's in like another 10 years or something like that.
Are you serious? That's 10 years.
It happens, I think, 5 times, and you get, and then you see it 3 or 4 times, and then you get like a 20-year break or something.
Are you serious?
Yeah, something like that.
How do you like that?
Yeah.
Wow. The Ikar of Purim is reading the Megillah. Meaning, even though there's other things that happen in Purim, Mishloach Manos, Matanos Levyonim, and other things, nevertheless, the main thing is the reading of the Megillah. And therefore, in the brachas of Purim, we make the bracha al Mikra Megillah. And we don't make a bracha on the other things. Whereas the only bracha that we make on the Purim is on the Megillah. And even though you're supposed to have in mind to be yotzi all the other things, openly the bracha itself is about the Megillah dafka. And what's more, that the other 2 brachas, which is Sha'asa Nisim Lavosenu and Shechianu, that are you make them on the day itself, so much that we find that if a person will find themselves in the desert and he doesn't have a Megillah, he still makes those 2 brachas, so they're not necessarily tied to the Megillah seemingly. But nonetheless, we find that when do we say those brachas? When we read the Megillah. Because the reading of the Megillah is the main thing of Purim. And in it expresses the essence of the day. And that's why we read it. It expresses the essence of the day. That's why when we make those blessings on the essence of the day, we make them dafka when we read the Megillah. So he says, since that's the din according to Nigla, it must also be the case al pi Chasidis. Panimius ha'inyanim. Following? It's right up your alley. Purim.
I'm not a big drinker, but
no, but you know, you're representative of Pras. So I remember Simchas Torah he didn't drink anything. He stuck out like a sore thumb.
No,
Just kidding. Okay, so he says it's the one thing I remember from Simchas Torah.
Wow.
Wasn't me didn't drink anything.
Odos Kriyas of Megillah Shaninu. Regarding the reading of the Megillah, we remember. We teach. Meheichan Kori Adam es Megillah veYotzi ba Yidei Chovaso. Where do you have to read from in the Megillah in order to be Yotzi? Basically, I'm just stalling here until we get a little crowd. Rabbi Meir says you have to read the whole thing. Rabbi Yehuda says from Ish Yehudi, and Rabbi Yossi says from the words Ma'achar Hadvarim Ha'ele. So now that we've decided that, I think we're ready to start our class. Okay, very good. Very good. Your own? Give it another round there. Gotta get you involved.
What page are we on?
Yes, we're on page
77, 76.
Yes, 70.
It was just getting good.
It was just warming up.
Yeah.
We're on 76.
Gimel. We started.
Yeah, we started Gimel. Biduk. Thank you, sir. Okay. Dion, you guys are going to learn some Hasidus? Good man. He said he was coming in. All right, so let's do a little quick review. We're talking about the 4 levels of the Eved Kanani, the Eved Ivri, Ama Ivriya, and the Bas. We said these represent the 4 worlds, and we'll also find these levels inside of every aspect of Avodas Hashem, whether it's Torah, Avodah, and Gemilus Chasidim. They all have these 4 levels. And we wound up saying that the Eved, the only one we really dealt with in full is the Eved Kanani inside of us, which is someone who does work because he's being forced to. In other words, that by an Eved Kanani it says, Bafkera nechale. He'd rather just be doing nothing, but because of the whip, he does the work. It's an outside, something that pushes him from the outside, that is, to get things motivated. He's not inwardly motivated from his own sense of love or devotion. And we said this is basically the Indian of Kabbalah soul, of putting the yoke on yourself from an outside force, basically. And in this, there's many, many levels, starting with the sort of perfect Eved Kanani, who is like a Bainani, that he has the fear of the whip upon him all the time in every thought, speech, and action. And going down, 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 basically into all the levels of Rasha V'Tovlo, which means that he's not able to, the whip is not able to affect him, maybe not in his thoughts all the time, maybe not in his speech and action, but sometimes at least he's able to do tshuva. And even those who can't do tshuva, at least the feelings of guilt affect them. And even though if you get to the, God forbid, the worst level, they don't even have feelings of remorse or guilt anymore, and that's like a Rasha Varalo. All these are in the level of our soul called Eved Kanani. And we said in davening, and again, because we're going to sort of get more into this concept, all these things, all these four levels are going to be seen on the three paths of service, which is Torah, Avoda, and Gevulus Chasadim. So in the Indian of Avoda right now, we're talking about davening. The Eved Kanani, we said, is from when you wake up, Modeh Ani, and through Hodu La Hashem Kirvi Shemo, Hodu, Modeh, these are words of recognition and acknowledgement, but not any sense of like real hisbonenus and inner thought to the matter, just a sort of recognition that I have to do it. I'm Modeh. I sort of succumb to the fact that this is the truth, whether I like it or not. So that's sort of the level we said was called Nehi of the soul. Chabad, Chagas, Nehi, the three stages. Chabad is your intellect, Chagas is your emotion, and Nehi is just like the fact that you do it, your active powers. And that's the level that we're dealing with the Eved Kanani. So we said that it's very possible, it seems that all the souls of our times are basically only have that much of their soul. And someone who's dealing with the Eved Kanani, only the aspect of their Nehi, of their Neshama, is ever actually invested into their body. So these higher levels of Avoda, in truth, they never really experience them. When I say in truth, because they can experience like a faint level of them. In other words, in the Nehi, you could have the Chagas of the Nehi, or the Chabad of the Nehi, as we said yesterday. Which means it's really just the power of action, but in that there's like sort of the intellect of the action, the emotions of the action, but it's not the true level of emotion or intellect as they would be in their own. Okay, anyway, that's what we said.
It's not the panimia of it?
It's not the panemius of it, but it's not even the real sort of... in other words, what does it mean? That, take for example, if you want to be like a skilled worker, Chevra, if you want to be a skilled worker, let's say, you have to, it's not just like kicking a ball, right? It's like you have to be like a trained worker. So it's still just action, but it's like, let's say, the intellect of the action. If you're going to use your hands in a very skilled way, it's not emotion, it's not intellect. It's still just, you're like a painter, you're a musician. But inside of your hands, you could see the person's emotions, you could see the person's intellect, right? So it's still the intellect of the action, as opposed to some sitting there like Albert Einstein, just being like a thinker. That's the level of thought in its own realm. This is a level of action, but it's the thought of the action. So that's probably what we're saying is like most of the lower souls which are existing in these generations, they're not souls that have the actual Chabad of their neshama inside of their body. It's like they don't even have the access of like really thinking deeply about Hashem in the true level of what a soul can do. Or emotion is not even found in our body. That part of the soul did not come into the body in these generations. So we don't really have real like love of Hashem like our forefathers did. We just have the action. We could just do it. And in the doing it doesn't mean it's just like a robot. There's the thought of the action and there's the emotion of the action, but it's not on par at all with the actual thoughts and emotions. That's what we're saying.
It's like the end of the day, it's like a factory worker. It's just like clocks in, clocks out.
I'm saying that's just pure action.
Yeah.
But there is such a thing as the thought of the action, the emotion of the action, but it's not real thought and real emotion, it's the thought and the emotion of the action.
There's like managers that work in the factory and stuff.
Oh, okay.
They're like thinking and stuff.
Yeah.
They're just also clocking in, they're not innovating, they're not like
Okay.
trying to push the envelope or anything.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's still getting done. And
Yeah.
in fact, that might be, in a certain sense, it's violent.
Right.
If you have somebody who,
Right. Just loves Hashem but doesn't do anything.
right,
He's not getting
or
it.
thinks, oh, I'm so, because I'm so smart, so I can, there's a better way to do this.
True. Definitely true. Okay, so going on now to the Eved Ivri, we said that this is already obviously a higher level because the difference between Eved Ivri and an Eved Kanani is that you're not allowed to serve to rule over your Eved Ivri with Avodas Parach. You're not allowed to give him back-breaking labor, which means that he does not have the same. In other words, you treat him sort of like your own. It's a different basically level. And what is his avoda then? His avoda is what's called working in the fields, because this is a job that the master doesn't want to do and the female slave is not able to do, and so it falls on the Eved Ivri. And what's the idea of bringing something into the fields spiritually? Is that basically it's not, well, even physically at this point still, it's that after you do all the work and you bring it into the fields, it's still not ready to be eaten. Right? The produce is not ready to be eaten as it is. And we'll take it from Os Gimel, 8 lines or 9 lines up from the bottom. She'eved Ivri mevi kol hitztarachus abayis lifnim. The line starts Gam. Right? Even Gam la'achre she'eved Ivri mevi kol hitztarachus abayis lifnim. Even after the Jewish slave brings all the things into the house, ein ze roya dayan la'achila. It's still not fit to be eaten. In order for it to be fit to be eaten, it has to be cooked, roasted. Some other activity has to be done with it. That cooking of it is the female slave's job. The master's not cooking his own food. The Jewish slave's out in the fields. So this girl, she's the one cooking the food. But just as far as the Jewish slave is concerned, the male, it's still not fit for eating. Okay, so this is what we got to yesterday. Which means that he did not yet affect in his service a shino hamahus. You know, Yoni? I'm thinking maybe Berdichev would be a great spot for you to on this thing, just because it's a little bit not. We don't have machitzas yet, but it's nice up there. Sorry about that. What's that? Shinoi mahus means a change of essence, basically. Right? A change of essence. Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to discuss right now. Ki'im ma shehevi mechutz lifnim. So there's no. Okay, we're going to get to it shortly. There's not a change of essence, but what there is that what he does do is he brings what's outside inside. That's his basically job. He brings the outside to the inside.
There's no change of essence in what?
In the person. Now we're talking about or in the food, right? They don't change in the simple meaning of the Gashmias part. They don't change the essence of the food. It's just it was growing in the field. Now it's sitting in the house, but it's the same exact thing. Nothing's changed. When you cook something, you must change it entirely, right? So he doesn't cook. That's not his job. And so too on a spiritual level. There's no change in the person. All that there is bringing something from outside to inside, which we're going to explain all these little metaphors. But in the meantime, we're just holding by the metaphor. He says, "Kamo came yuvan gam b'chinas eved ivi beruchnis." Here you go. So it is with the Jewish slave spiritually. He has a godly feeling in the heart. As we went up a level, so this is a guy who's not an Eved Kanani. He's not just working with his hands. He has a feeling he loves his boss basically. He's not just a sort of a foreigner in the house. He's a Yid. Makom lo naseh etzlo shina mahus. But by him, he has a feeling in the heart, but it doesn't make a change in his essential being. Let's see what it means. V'hainu she'hergish halev shelo b'kedusha hu ba'ofen shemidosav hativim kamo shehem ba'ofani tivam. Which means, and this is an important line, which means that the feeling that he has in his heart in kedusha is in an ofen, in a manner that his midosav hativim, his natural midos, right, are kamo shehem ba'ofen tivam. They remain as they are in their natural state. Which means that even though he uses them for kedusha, he doesn't change them from being the nature that they are. Meaning, what? One more line. Im bekivutz, im pashtus. Whether he's basically one who kivutz is sort of like a gevura, his pashtus is chesed. So it means to say like this: he changes it from outside to inside, which means he's not the nefesh Bahamis anymore. Like, in other words, what was wrong with the Eved Kanani? He never really loved Hashem. He was ready to do anything else but work. It's just that he had the fear of Hashem on him, so he did it. But on his own, pefkera nechale, he would rather be by himself and not doing this. This guy, that's not the case. His interest is in serving Hashem. He'd rather be there than anywhere else. Like, he's basically a lover of Hashem. He wants to do the job. He's not forcing himself, but whatever natural midos that he had before, for example, if he was an ish chesed or an ish gevura, when he does it for Hashem, he's still an ish chesed and ish gevura. It's just now that it's holy love as opposed to animalistic love. It's holy fear as opposed to animalistic fear. That's called taking it from outside to inside, but it's not called changing the mahus, because it's still chesed. It's just holy chesed as opposed to animalistic chesed. His love is in the mimer as opposed to in the coffee, right? So he's still a lover. In other words, he's not like change his whole attitude. If he was basically like a very giving person before, so he's going to be giving person now. He's just going to give to like Jewish causes. If he was a disciplined person before, he's going to be a disciplined person now, but he's going to be disciplined in Yiddishkeit. But he doesn't change his nature. That's the idea of he doesn't change his mahus. So Aleph, back to your question. That's what it means. He doesn't change his mahus. He is what he is. He just makes it holy.
That's the Eved Kanani?
No, that's the Eved Ivri. The Eved Kanani doesn't even love Hashem, basically. He loves himself. It's just that he's a perfect servant. So he does everything he's supposed to do, despite the fact that he doesn't want to do any of it. Like most of us. Hooray! Right? Okay, don't feel so bad. Hooray! Okay, but there's different levels of Eved Kanani. My slave TV was not like the other slaves. We said no. There's a certain high level in that, as Ariel was also hinting to. Anyway, humanatzelosa, this Eved Ivri, he uses his natural powers, right? Likadusha, only for holiness. Not zayois, he uses them out for kedusha. And that's the mashal that he brings from what's outside inside, right? He takes it's not just wild crops growing in the field, right? That's an animalistic, level of just like pure nature. He cuts it, he does some work on it, and he brings it inside, he makes it holy. But this is really no change in it. It's still just wheat like it was wheat before, it's wheat now. Because the very nature of his midos doesn't change at all. He's still a man of chesed. He hasn't the kedusha has not affected him so much that he's basically can do whatever he wants with it. He can transform himself in truth. There's a concept like this. We say that an animal has to have split hooves, right? And the idea of the split hooves is like that there has to be the splitness is that there has to be a complete divide between chesed and gevura to show that, or whatever, the two sides of a person's personality, to show that you're not doing something merely because it's your nature. If it's not totally split, the idea is that your service to Hashem is an outcropping of your natural inclinations. In other words, there's like a person's like an unbelievable studier, and he sits in the base medrash all day. Is that really coming from a total place of kedusha, or is that anyway what he would be doing? Like, in other words, like there was a rabbi in the Gemara who questioned himself before he passed away from this world. Like, was he righteous enough? They said, Rabbi, you never stopped speaking Torah your entire life. Like, what could be the problem? He says, because I'm not sure if I was a Greek philosopher, I wouldn't do the same thing. And it was just like, that's my nature. I'm a Marash Choradik kind of person. I'm like an intense guy. And so I happen to be born in a Jewish household, so this is but can I really say that I like, and the split hooves is the idea that you're able to split yourself into whatever is required of you. And so they said to him, the response of his students was, no, Rabbi, you remember one Purim, you threw out all your money that you had in your house for the poor, and it like settled him down. He's like, yes, you're right. Meaning to say that he was willing to have the opposite attribute of strictness and discipline. He was, if needed, he was able to waste all his money on the poor, and that's the idea of, mebazvez means like to give it in a wasteful manner, just like throw it out there, and that showed that he was able to switch his mahus. Basically, he wasn't stuck in one sort of way.
The Kohanim is like split hooves.
Yeah, same idea.
Oh.
So he says, "She'im tivo," but this guy doesn't have it. Im tivo bekivutz. If he has a sort of disciplined, retracting type of nature, hayu gam achshav bekivutz. So even when he's holy, even when he brings it inside, he's still the same way. Ve'im tivo bispashtus. If he has the nature of being generous and like sort of outgoing, hayu gam achshav bispashtus. So even now he's the same way, just in the side of holiness. The only difference is that now his midos are aroused in holiness as opposed to being aroused in worldliness. The tam hadavarhu, the reason for it, and why is it like that? Because he's not serving Hashem with his chabad. This is, in other words, this is chagas, right?
Yeah.
And this, by the way, is just an interesting thing. Like, we talk about Chagas Hasidim versus Chabad Hasidim. Right. We talk about this a lot sometimes. So the difference is that everybody's going for the Chagas. Right? To say that someone's a Chabad Hasid should not confuse a person that his goal is to be a big thinker only. Right? Because as you said earlier, that what's the use of thinking if you don't bring it down into emotion and bring it further down into deed? So, but the idea is that if you're just dealing with Hashem at the level of Chagas, in other words, that all you do is you arouse yourself in love, which could be done basically by just being by a Rebbe. The whole idea of the original Hasidim is that they wanted to be by the Rebbe and looking at the Rebbe, and because looking at a Rebbe makes you fall in love with Hashem. You're basically watching a miracle. It's like standing by the split sea. Like, you're just going to be like, okay, I'm in love with Hashem. What do I do? Because it just arouses, especially a Yid, it just arouses you to fall in love. Like, that's what more do you need? But you're not using your chabad. It doesn't require your chabad. It's very possible to be aroused emotionally without getting your chabad involved. That could totally happen. But the idea is that they will only ever get you to a point where you take it from outside inside, which means you're able to move your animalistic love and become truly a godly love. But from just working from the standpoint of your emotional state, you can never have access to changing your emotional state from being a lover to a fearer or a fearer to a lover. Because you're not working with the controls. You're working from below to above, basically. So what he's saying is that this person, even if you bring from the Eved Ivri, if you bring it from outside to inside, because you're not working with your Chabad, that's why you can't change your mahus. Hang on, Ali has his hand up? No, you just
Also, we were saying something
make it an oath. What's that?
We were saying something very cool about that the other night in the Rabbi Gornson, the Sikha we were learning.
Okay.
He was saying that also the problem with the emotions is that the emotions like have another in play. So
Right.
It's never like the person like in their pure state. They're always being affected by another being because they're reacting with an emotional reaction. So like with Hashem, relationship with Hashem, like you want to get to know him and his actual where he's like when he's not being affected by anything. You have to go into the realm of thought where he's not being pulled by just a certain attribute or something like that. That's already like a contraction of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's already like being affected by something.
Yeah.
It's not just him by himself, which is just thinking.
Yep. It says, like, for example, when you get excited, the word in Hebrew is hispalus, which means excitement, but actually it comes from the word pa'ula, which means a deed. It's very interesting. Just linguistically, the whole thing that you just said is like right in there in those words. When you're doing a deed, it's clearly you're not seeing the ultimate person.
Yeah.
Right? You're seeing basically some very, very small thing that maybe you could learn something about that person by looking at a painting that he made, or even less, a soccer ball that he kicked. You know what I'm saying? So that's because it's just a pa'ula. Pa'ula is something which is totally separate from the person.
Right.
So even emotions, which normally we think of as the person himself, it's like way deep up in there. It's not malchus, it's not nehi, it's chagas, it's like you. But nonetheless, the word for excitement is hispalus, which means basically a pa'ula. It's just like, it's a pa'ula from the standpoint of the mind. In other words, not the real you, because maybe you could say the real you is your mind, because your mind, as you were just saying, can exist without the need for an other. You could just sit there and think, and it's not basically your response to something outside of you. So yeah, it's not the essential you, and therefore, if you're just working on that level, you're not really touching the essential you. Therefore, you're just working on. In other words, someone takes like a painting that someone else made and starts to mess around with it. It's not going and change it just because you change someone's deed. It doesn't mean at all that you've changed them, right? You got to actually get inside of them to actually manipulate them. So the same is true here. V'hainu sha'agdei hamochin Chabad, which means that through the mind of Chabad, na'aseh shinu hamahus. This is how you make a real change in your being. In other words, you can shock yourself. You could do things that are totally outside of your own nature from a standpoint of the intellect. And you can even strangely love things that you hate and hate things that you love, which is wondrous, you know? It's like it's built into you. I don't like this. But with your mind, if your mind is working, you can change your mahus. You could decide, I do like this. I mamish love this. I'm in love with this. Which a minute ago you were hating it. It's very deep. Again, I wish we had these things like in full measure, but not to exclude the fact that the whole beginning of the Maimer was explaining how every single Jew has all these qualities. So even if you want to say ours is like residing the whole thing in the realm of Nehi, as we said before, it does not exclude the fact that you have the possibility to do an avoda with your chagas, and you still have a heart, you still have a brain. Yeah. So we're not saying that all these levels are not available to you. We're just putting everything in a perspective. But certainly, we can do this as well, and that's basically what the Sfarim that we have. And it was a Chabad Chasidus. It makes you use your Chabad, just like when you're going to sit and learn Gemara. There's no getting around it. If you're going to learn this thing and you're going to understand what it says, you're thinking, and you're thinking very hard. Right? You're thinking in a certain way that requires you to think. So that's what Chabad Chasidus is. It's not just like it's a certain thing which, when you put your head around it, it forces you to use your Chabad in a very deep way. So, this is the Indian of the Mochin. They changed the Mahus. Kevan Shabudasu who rak ba'amidos chagas bilvad. Since a person will only will serve from a place of a chagas, in other words, he's just trying to arouse his emotions in holiness. L'chein ein bezeh shino mahus. Therefore, he can't change them. V'hainu shavudaso hi ba'ofen shemagalim ma'ores hadechilu v'rachimu tevim, which means that his service is in a manner that he reveals and arouses his fear and love, which are natural. Sheyeshtem b'chol echad miYisrael. In other words, what he's doing is he's basically just revealing that we do have a natural love and fear for Hashem. Your godly soul bears already. It's not like you're inventing love and fear of God. You have a godly soul inside of you. So all you're doing is you're basically letting it come out. You're giving it room to show. Even though it's fear and love which are natural, it doesn't come by itself, as we know. To actually get your godly soul to show its emotion, it doesn't come all by itself. It's an Eved Ivri. Right? It takes a tremendous amount of service. Even the Chagas level is way, way above the Eved Kanani, which we were basically saying before is pretty much a Beinani. Right? So even to get to the point where your actual love comes out is a massive thing. It's no small task. Because naturally a person just loves his body more than his soul. So actually to get the love to come out, it's tremendous. But since the midos aren't coming because of his avoda, right? In other words, he's not forming these midos. He's just revealing them. He's doing an avoda to reveal them. But the midos are not coming, the midos are not built and basically hatched, and or it's not even the right word, but invented or produced because of his work. The midos are just being revealed because of it, but they're already there. Sharia midos hem tivios, because they're already naturally found inside of him, just deep in. Vavodasu hirak lasir davar ma'alim ala midos, and his service really therefore is just to remove that which is covering over his midos. L'chein nishar ma'midos kefi tivam. Therefore they remain as they are, either love or fear. It's just that it's godly from outside to inside. Im b'kivutz im b'yispashtus. And it cannot be a change of essence upon this. So going back to like sort of putting this on the map that we said before, that all these four levels of servitude are based on a world, and they're based on a certain aspect of the soul, and they're based on a certain aspect of davening, etc. These things are found everywhere. So here he throws it in. What is this in the map? This is Ruach. Before it was Nefesh. This is Ruach. This is Yitzira. Eved Kanani was Asiya. And She Avodas HaChagas. And this is the Avodah of the Midos. Right? Before it was the Avodah of basically the Levushim, the garments. Vavodas HaTafila. Where is it holding? Where are we in davening? Because we basically go through this every single day when we daven. By the way, this is very handy guidebook for davening. If you want to know like what should I be thinking about when I daven, this mimer is mamish like play-by-play handbook of what theoretically the davening is based on. I mean, fact is we daven quickly and we're not always thinking bichlal, but if you want to get into like a serious davening, he tells you when and what to think about. So what happens all of a sudden at the level of ruach or the level of yitzira in your davening, in tefillah, hu inyan baruch sha'amar and psuki de zimra. This is when you hit baruch sha'amar, everything changes. You go to another world. You're now in yitzira.
That's the Ivri slave.
That's the, yes. Shinyanam, Psuki de Zimmer is the verses of praise, which is basically from Ashrei all the way until Yishtabach. That's like Yitzira. And up until there is Asiya.
It makes sense to switch to praise.
Right? Exactly, because you're trying to get aroused for Hashem, basically.
It's from Ashrei through Yishtabach.
No, it's from Baruch Sha'amar until Yishtabach. In general, Baruch Sha'amar is a blessing. You say Baruch Atah Hashem in there, right? Yeah. And then Yishtabach also has a blessing. It's you say Shem and Malchus. You make a bracha. So what that is that's the beginning bracha and the after bracha. Just like when you eat, you make a first bracha and an after bracha. So on the verses of praise, you're saying a first bracha, which is Baruch Sha'amar, and then you're making an after bracha, which is Yishtabach, and everything in between is the thing you're blessing on. Shinyanam hu yisoros hamidas, and the whole idea there is you're trying to arouse yourself in excitement. That's why there's a certain Indian to like say them out loud. Because hakol ma'or hakavana, the voice arouses your intention. So really, this whole thing is like a song. Psuki de zimra means verses of song, really. Because you're just like when a person sings, it's just like, why do people go to rock concerts and sing with the band? They want to get excited. They're trying to excite yourself. But here you're exciting yourself about how great God is. So it arouses your godly soul's emotions to come out. But there's no mind in here. You're not a meditator exactly yet in the deep way. I mean, a little bit. Even though, you do need a little bit of meditation, even to arouse your midos, because otherwise you're loving your body more than your soul. Without thinking, you really cannot arouse your midos. So why are you saying it's not meditation? Because nevertheless, you're not really working hard with your mind. It's like there's different levels of using the mind, is what we've just discovered. And the simple level of using your mind is just enough mind that it requires to arouse your emotions. Where it's like we were saying before, there's like the Chabad of the Nehi and there's the Chagas of the Nehi. Well, this is like now we're in the Chagas. It's like the mind of the Chagas. You're not in the realm of intellect mamish. You're using the intellect of the emotions, which means it's a type of intellect enough required to arouse the emotions, but you're not even bichlal in the realm of intellect truly yet. You're in the realm of emotions. It's just that emotions has an intellect that comes along with them. You follow that? What are the mochin there for? Is the mind just to arouse the midos. That's what they're there for at that level. So in general, sometimes we call this like the mochin of bina versus the mochin of chokhmah. But otherwise, we could just call it the Chabad of the Chagas. But to understand this further, the difference between these two levels of mind, that's where you're going now. Yuvan ze al derech hahefresh bein limud lemigares ubein limud be'iyun. Girsa and iyun, as we call it. Right? We can understand this difference of the two levels of mind by the difference between girsa and iyun. Iyun means to deeply look into something, to learn something with all the mafarshim, and like basically, for example, in the yeshiva, when you learn something be'iyun mamish, you could be learning 2 or 3 pages the entire year of a Gemara.
Right.
Because you sit on, you go into every little detail and you look up every little tiny matter, and like you don't let one concept be unturned. Whereas when you learn something begirsa, you could learn the whole Gemara in a year.
7 years.
No, I'm saying like one Gemara, right? But yeah, or the whole Gemara in 7 years. That's like definitely a girsa type of learning, right? You learn a daf a day. It depends on who you are. I mean, someone can, if you take the whole day, you can learn a daf a day also be'iyun. But theoretically, it's not the idea is to learn it be'iyun. The idea is to learn it begirsa. So he says, so this is the difference, 2 types of thinking process. Hine gam b'limud hagirsa tzrich lios havana basaga. When you learn it, even in a girsa level, you still have to understand it. Doesn't mean you're just reading it. If you don't understand it, it's not called learning Torah. One of the rules of learning Torah, he brings here in the bottom of the footnote of Hilchas Talmud Torah, is that when it comes to mikra, when it comes to learning Chumash and the written Torah, you can just read the letters and you're yotzi. Because it's about the letters. It's the written Torah. It's all about reading it. When it comes to the oral Torah, you cannot get away with and call it learning Torah just by reading the letters of the Gemara. It doesn't work. You're not doing anything. You're basically just like wasting your time. Bittul Torah. Because if you don't understand what you're doing in some level, it's not called Limud Torah. So therefore, even though we're talking about girsa as like a quick learning, it doesn't mean that you're just not understanding it. The im came, and if so, behechrech shagam Limud girsa yesh havana basaga. Therefore, certainly when it comes to girsa, there's also an understanding. Acha hefreshu, but the difference is shekasher lo med'ain be'iyun. When you learn it be'iyun very deeply, azai moser v'nosen es atzmo. It gets you give yourself into it in a totally different way. You throw yourself into the topic, like they used to say when the Rebbe's mother would come into the room when he was a kid learning. She would bring friends and like show her friends like how deeply he was learning. She would like scream at him and call at him and like knock on pans that he wouldn't even know that she was there. This is like the tricks that she showed her friends. Look at this guy. That's it. Because where was he? He was like in a level of connection where there was nothing outside of the thing he was learning. There was no more. It wasn't like you were saying before, Baruch. There was no more like pa'ula. It wasn't something that was separate from him. He went right into the essence of the thing where there was nothing else existing, no other. And this is the idea of learning be'iyun. When you learn be'iyun, you give yourself entirely over to the matter. Ala seichel, into the intellect, la sigo, to grasp it, ad shu misatzim imamuska, until the point that you become essentially united with the topic that you're learning. There's no more, not only is there no more extraneous thoughts, but you literally become like a part of that intellect. Like you become consumed in the intellect. Whatever it is that you're thinking about, it's grabbed you and it's taken you over. You're like part of this concept now. So you can see how that can happen, right? There's concepts out there. Concepts of, of different worlds, different sugyas, different like scientific concepts, different art, whatever. There's concepts that are existing independent of you. It's hard for us to think that there's anything existing independent of us. But there are entities out there which are also called spiritual entities, and these are somewhat physical of the spiritual. Meaning to say there's a concept of what it means to understand the Or Ein Sof, or at least the world of Atzilus. It's whether you're thinking about it right now or not, trust me, it is there. And the idea is that when you put your mind into such a deep way, you become part of that concept. Like the you is no longer independent, you're now completely given over and lost inside of something else, into the muska. It's a very deep concept.
What are we relating this level to?
This is the level of the Chabad. This is not what the Eved Ivri does. This is like we're saying that if the Eved Ivri needs to think in order to arouse his emotions, but it doesn't change his mahus because he's not using his chabad. So what's the difference between thinking in such a level which just is enough to arouse your emotions versus thinking at the level that can change the mahus of your emotions? So we said it's the difference between iyun and girsa. So girsa is like learning fast, which means you still understand it, but you're not lost in the concept. Whereas what we're talking about right now is the Indian learning be'iyun, learning at the level of Chabad. V'muskal naisa mahus shalo, right? That the idea, it becomes your essence. There's no more you. You can actually lose all sense of like personality, all sense of interest, all other extraneous thoughts. They just completely disappear because you are in a state of oneness with the concept. It just reminds me, we were saying before, we were talking about, in the last Maimer, we were talking about, 2 Maimers ago, we were talking about silence. They should like silence yourself, right? That sayag l'choch mashtika, like the ultimate level you can get. And I was sort of like balancing, you're not really just sitting there quiet, because on the contrary, someone could sit there in total silence, they could still be completely absorbed in themselves. Yeah. So true silence is like you're silent of your existence, but you're not quiet. On the contrary, it allows something else to come through your existence. And that's what happens when you will become nullified to this concept. It means that the concept becomes you. It doesn't mean that there's no you. It means that instead of you, all you are is this concept coming through you. So you can understand, if that's a godly concept, it means you're giving a kli and an avenue for elukus to be had. Right now, I said to you before, excitedly, the concept of Atzilus is sitting there. It's true, but it's not sitting here. It's not sitting inside of me. Right? It's not sitting in the place where I am. And on the contrary, since I'm not thinking about it, it might be everywhere but inside of me. Because I'm thinking about something else. But if you will nullify yourself in a total essential way to the concept of Atzilus, you bring Atzilus inside of the place where you are, and you cease to be there, and the concept of Atzilus is now sitting there. That's like a mamish, a bittul to elukus. And this is truly only attainable through the Chabad. Because the Chagas, even if you'll arouse yourself, it's still you being aroused. It's the other. There's still not like you're not nullifying yourself to something above you. It's very deep.
Is this the level of Bria or?
Yeah, this is going to be the Amma Ivriya. It's going to be Bria, not Atzilus. I'm just saying Atzilus, like Lamashal, for a concept to think about. It could be anything. It could be thinking about also the Truma, laws of Truma, whatever it is. But the point is, when you lose yourself into a concept, that concept mamish consumes you, and there's no more you. There's that concept where you once were.
Okay, and then this corresponds in davening to everything after.
Well, no, we'll get there. We're going to get there. We didn't even get there, Bichlal.
All right.
Right now, we're just talking about it as opposed to thinking at the level of girsa. So he says, "Muskal nasa muhushalo." This concept becomes your very essence. Masha einkin kasher lomed lemigara. It's not so when you're learning, so to speak, quickly or to cover ground. Even though you fully understand what you're learning, you understand every single word and every single concept. Nothing's getting lost on you. You're only learning the so to speak, the general. It's not really the word. It's the the general concept alone. The topical, like the topical, like just how it is. You're not going deep. What'd you say? Limigares. It means like the word girsa, like it means to basically learn.
This is the one he's talking about, right?
Yeah, this is like the lower one. There's iyun and girsa. So he's saying, when you're learning something just topically, you're also understanding it. You're understanding everything. You're just not allowing it to consume you in the same way. You're not mamish giving yourself over to the intellect, to understand it to the point that it becomes your essence. And when we talk about hisbonenus, and we talk about the different levels of hisbonenus, this is like the big one, right? When the class is over, and the concept is basically, right now what we're doing is a somewhat learning it sort of topically, like, okay, I get it. And then the idea is to like put the book down and push it, meditate on it deeply. Like it's an active, intense process of thinking hard, basically, where you're uncovering and going through every little possible question in your mind and topic and making the material become one with you. So it's like it just becomes you. That's like the real hisbonenus. And if you don't, Kim nishar mahuso hakodemes, right? You don't change. You don't become this new entity, this new thought. You remain who you were before. And what? This thought is just inside of you. See, the difference is that you can go inside of the thought, or the thought can go inside of you. When the thought is going inside of you, there's still a you there, and you're just like have a thought in your mind. And by all means, it is not nullifying you. But if you'll think about it enough and enough and enough and enough, you go inside the thought, not the other way around. And what's there is the thought, and you are nullified inside of it. That's called Chabad.
How does this relate to the grain or the produce from the field?
It's called cooking it.
This is the process of cooking it.
Yeah, this is cooking
Transforming
it. Yeah, you make it something else. It's no longer just the thing that it was, it now becomes a new thing.
And now you can digest it.
It's digestible, exactly. He's going to get into all that.
How does this work with ideas that like have no connection to us? You see, like ideas that we're not even in the picture. Say how the upper worlds work. Like how do you like contemplate on that so much that it changes you, but you're not even. How does it change you when you're not even?
Well, when I'm saying it changes you,
part of it.
first of all, you are part of it. The higher worlds are everywhere. Okay? On the contrary, they're like more real in a certain sense than this world. Right? It's just that we don't see things clearly as they are, but it's not like they're a fairy tale. That's what we say. We say the world is created yesh ma'ayin. This is the something, and up there is basically nothing. Let's go about our business. Hashem like laughs at that perspective. In reality, we're nothing, and what's going on up there is like mamish reality. So to say that it's not really there, it's not really part of you, or you have nothing to do with it, it's not exactly correct. It's really there, it's really part of you, and you have everything to do with it. It's just that we're oblivious to it. So thinking about it is what makes us not be oblivious to it, makes us be sort of connected to it, makes us be one with it. But more importantly than just knowing about it,
Right.
is that when you think about it in such a deep level that you basically someone's going to knock on the door and you don't even hear them anymore because you're so engrossed in this thought, it means that you have actually changed your mahus. You're not who you were before. Before, who you were was a person who was thinking about something, and now you're actually an entity. You are the thought. You become like swallowed up in this entity that you're thinking about. If no one can talk to you anymore, you're gone. Where'd you go? Right? You went to a place where you're now part of the concept. You've literally changed your being from being a something to being a nothing inside of a bigger idea than you.
Well, I understand that. I was just, I guess, confused of what changes. But I guess maybe what changes is that those worlds become more real. Like if you contemplate on them more.
But again, the change in and of itself is happening that, in other words, put it like this. We're talking about two levels of thinking right now. One is the thinking which is the mind of the midos, and one is the thinking which is the mind to itself, right? So in general, the world thinks, and you're sort of giving a little bit of voice to this, that if you think about yourself, it's much more practical than when it comes to changing your behavior. Because basically, if I'm doing something I don't want to do, right, and I think hard about changing that behavior, and so to speak, taking it from outside to inside, like using my love instead of for bad things for good things. So look, I can see the change right off the bat. I'm a changed man, right? Because it's practical. It's like a self-help book. Like I'm doing something wrong. I want to do something right. I should think about the things I'm doing wrong and change into the things I'm doing right, which is fine. And you can affect a change in from klippa to kedusha in that fashion. That's what he's saying. You can go from a state of bringing it from outside to inside. That's as far as you'll get, though. But in terms of like making a significant and true change in yourself, you haven't, because you were already that person. It was just covered with schmutz. Okay. But you haven't actually made a real change in yourself. Whereas here, you're going to start thinking about Kabbalah, you're supposed to think about the higher worlds. You're not thinking about yourself at all. You're not thinking about things that are practical in your life at all. You're not thinking about how you can perfect yourself at all. You're literally thinking about things that are completely beyond you. Right. So you might say to yourself, how does this happen? This is like an impractical way. I'm going to go down and change myself in the other way. So Hasidus says, no, it's the exact opposite. That what changes a person is basically less you, more God. Bittuling yourself, right? The word bittul is the key factor to change, because what's basically standing in the way of you being godly is yourself. So the ultimate way of undoing yourself is not, as it would seem more practical, to think about yourself and think about changing yourself, because you're going to have one big problem in that. In the end of the day, you're always there. You can't, right? You're always so it's this self, it's a bad self, it's a good self, it's a But the point is that you're never going to really change in an essential way, because the whole meditation is based on you, and you're not. The whole point is to move yourself out of the picture. So when you go on these like weird rides, like these trips into the higher world, basically, and halavai for a moment, you would like cease to be thinking about yourself. Although it seems impractical, that is the most practical way to actually make a significant change in yourself. Because for a moment, you're actually bittul. For a moment, you're actually not thinking about yourself. For a moment, you're actually not there. And the only way to do that is to deeply meditate to the point, and it's not sitting there quiet, because when you can be meditating, you think about who knows what, all the things that happen in your life. You're still thinking about yourself. Meditation is mamish. It's like learning Gemara. It's like an intense intellectual struggle, but in the topics of godliness. And why not do it in Gemara? First of all, do it in Gemara, because it's the same exact thing. The only difference is, when you're thinking about nigla, you're still thinking about a world. And you're in the world. So even though you could be lost in a concept, the concept is a worldly concept. Right. When you think about Kabbalah and Hasidus, you're lost in a concept which is taking place in a dimension when you do not exist in. It's before the world even got created. So you're literally bittling yourself out of existence. Whenever you nullify yourself to a concept, you're nullifying yourself. But you're only nullifying yourself to the point of where that concept resides. Nigla resides in the world, basically, to some degree. So you're nullifying yourself to some concept which is still worldly, which still has yesh. So when you meditate on Hasidus, you're nullifying yourself in a much higher capacity. You're nullifying yourself, to the concept, so you disappear. But what is this concept? It's a concept which precedes creation. It's a concept which is God Himself, so it's higher. Is it clear, the answer?
Yeah, it's a very good answer.
What do you mean? So thinking about yourself is easier than change. And then you can change the flipper into kedusha.
Right. What I mean by that is it's the Eved Ivri, right? You can take it from the outside and bring it inside, which means you can turn your false loves, like your negative your negative worldly desires. You can turn them into godly desires. You can change yourself in the sense that you can stop being bad and start being good. So that is worthwhile and great, and I'm not knocking it entirely. I'm just saying, if you compare that to the real meditation, you get to a much greater change of self with the real meditation. Because you can never really go out of experiencing yourself, okay, it's a holy self, but guess what? Even a holy self is not the end-all be-all. It's still a yeshus. It's still there's a certain arrogance that can still come into the picture, and a certain blockage of Hashem's pure expression, the fact that you think that you're a holy self, not even in sort of like a false way. You could be truly loving God, but the fact that you're there, yesh misha ohev, you're the lover, means you're not really nullified and allowing Hashem to take that space. You're taking that space, you're just taking it in a healthy way instead of an totally unhealthy way.
So we're not really talking about changing the self, we're more talking about negating the self.
No, but when you negate the self, that really is a big change of self, because it means your self becomes totally utilizable to the Creator in whatever He would require you to do. Because if you don't change yourself at that level, you're only able to serve Him without a split hoof. You're able to serve Him in the way that you want to serve Him. That's why it's ultimately selfish. You say, I'll give all my money to tzedakah, because before I was giving all my money for drugs. You're a giver.
Yeah.
So okay, but you're not. Is that real service? There's a master here, and he might tell you tomorrow to do something completely contrary to your nature, and you won't do for him, even if you take yourself out from the outside to the inside, because you haven't really changed yourself. So that's what we're saying. It's not just nullifying yourself like you don't exist. That's not the point. It's to be go out of existence. The point is that when you get to this state where you refine yourself to the point that you no longer are locked into your own nature, even your own godly nature, you're mamish a useful person to the Creator, because whatever message He will send you on, you'll do. It says by angels, they can only do one thing at a time. Like if you send an angel to heal, you have to send another angel to destroy, because they can only do one thing at a time, because they are the definition of what it means to be locked into their nature in a holy way. But that's not a neshama. A neshama is a mahalich. Mahalech bina omdim, we're called. Like we're walkers amongst the standards. Who are the standards? When you're standing in one place, locked down to one midah, those are the angels. We're walkers amongst them. We should get to a point where Hashem can use us for all different kinds of jobs, even contradictory jobs. And that requires a bittul. So in other words, even to serve Hashem, just basically on like the basic level where you're not locked into your own interests.
Right.
It requires this level of meditation.
So I guess the problem is being stuck in oneself.
Yeah, even if it's a holy self, it's a mitzrayim.
In like a certain way.
What was that word? Mahalech?
Mahalech ben omdim, it says. We're walkers amongst the standards.
Right, so we're talking about Shema and Amidah.
You just want to get all the pieces for the
Well, I want
puzzle.
to daven today. Come on.
Yeah, so that yeah.
This